A bunch of people asked about my artwork, so I figured I'd give a little background on what inspires me. This is a meme from DeviantArt that came out about 8 years ago. It's an influence map meant to show the different artists and things that influence someone's artwork. These aren't all of my influences, but they were the major ones at the time. The way it works is pretty obvious. The larger the box, the greater the influence. So let's start with the small boxes and work our way up. Right from the start, my man Joe Madureira. I'm sure that's not how you pronounce his name, so I'm just going to call him Joe Mad. Back in 2000, Joe Mad would have taken up the whole page. I learned to draw hair, eyes, hands, and abs from this man. His artwork is incredible. Everything about Joe Mad's work screams action. I've never seen a boring shot from this dude. Even his static designs look interesting. What's so cool about his work, and what drew me to it, is that he blended American and Japanese art styles pretty damn well. Now, there is a cheat here. His style is heavily influenced by SNK and Capcom, but add in some Bushima and you get Joe Mad. Next up would be the other major influence, Glenn Keane. He's my favorite animator. You've seen his work, Ariel, Aladdin, The Beast, Tarzan, Pocahontas. This man made me want to be an animator. He's just unbelievably good. Go look him up on YouTube. There's a video of him teaching students how to animate, and he does straightaway animation. That's where you don't plan it out. You just draw the frames as you go. It's fucking flawless. The students were completely floored. They're not listening to him, they're watching the man make magic. His skill and talent are top notch. That transformation at the end of Beauty and the Beast, looks like sculptures. Years later, I watched the behind the scenes where he explained that he couldn't figure the scene out, couldn't get it to work, and asked for more time. This was barely a month before the film had to be finished. Disney gave him 2 weeks, but made it clear that if he couldn't get it done, he shouldn't bother to come back. So Glenn goes to Europe and studies Rodin's sculptures, the Thinking Man, the Gates of Hell. With barely a few days left, he turned in the rough animation for the scene, and the producer was in tears. That's how good his rough animation was. And here's this 7-year-old child who watched this and caught that it looked like a sculpture. I absolutely love Glenn Keane's work. Right next to him is Humberto Ramos. I first saw Ramos's work on a Gen 13 comic. I thought if I could draw like that, I could make comics. My natural style is very cartoony, and at the time, the cross-hatching image style was still popular. Seeing someone like Ramos showed me that I could have a chance in comics if I could get to his level. I'm still not there, but I've learned so much from his work. Ramos is sneaky because his style looks so simple, but it's actually hard to draw, and there's tricky details in it. He's way more skilled and talented than people usually give him credit for. Check out Revelations. Look at those covers. Look at the backgrounds in those pages. Just immaculate copies of grand cathedrals and well-known locations in Rome. Some of it might be traced. You'd almost hope it was traced because it's unfair if he's that good. What really did it for me was the Spider-Man stuff. I love when people play with Spidey's size, and Ramos made him kind of spindly and wiry, playing on that spider theme. It made it more interesting with Spidey's powers because he doesn't look like a guy who could lift a truck over his head. Ramos also played with the lenses, squinting them and adding other emotions. I'd never seen anything like that before, and it just gave Spidey so much character. That's why I stole it. The other thing that I love about Ramos is that he draws kids like kids. He's one of the few artists who nails this easily. Impulse looked like a kid. You ask the man to draw a 10-year-old and what you get is a 10-year-old. And he plays with size. His Colossus is huge, while his Nightcrawler looks like an acrobat. He's also damn good at expressions. If you are ever at a loss for faces, he's your man. Next up is a great Bruce Timm. Not only did this dude teach me a nice, simplified art style, but he gave the world the best Batman ever. Bruce Timm's work is like Ramos's. It looks easy to draw, but it's actually harder to copy than you think. What I primarily use his style for is a rough sketch while laying out a pose. That's because his style breaks down the major muscle groups pretty well. If you can figure out how his style would look from a certain angle, you'll be able to draw in the correct muscles. Over the years, I've added in other influences like Gendy Tartakovsky and Sean Galloway into what I call my animated style. But you can still see the Bruce Timm influence in the posing and muscle forms. By the way, Warner Brothers, this is the guy you want in charge of your cinematic universe. Why you haven't brought him and Paul Dini in to run things is really baffling. I don't know anybody who didn't like Batman, Superman, Batman Beyond, or the Justice League. So, bring them in and let them run the production. It'll be cohesive, good, and feel like part of the DC universe. Our next one is another tricky name. My French isn't good, so I'm gonna butcher this. Olivier Coipel. I'm just going to call him Olivier to save myself. Oh my god. This man got me to buy a Legion of Superheroes book. I had no interest in the Legion at all, but I saw this cover and I was like, gotta have it. And this man draws the best Storm ever. Ever. Just beautiful. African. Perfect. But that's not why I love Olivier's art. I love his art because the man's detail skill makes you want to slap your mama. Look at this. Look at it. It's so beautiful, it's disgusting. It just makes you want to put your pencil down. And what I love the most is that he doesn't lose all that gesture and looseness when he adds in details, whether he does it in pencil or inks it himself. It's always dynamic, and for the life of me, I can't figure out why other than that he's French, because this is really common with other European artists. Now I know you're looking at Naruto, but let's pop back up to Jamie Hewlett. We'll get to Naruto in a second, don't worry. Jamie Hewlett, the guy behind Gorillaz. That was actually what got me into his art, not Tank Girl. The reason he's such a big influence is because his work helped me learn line weight. Shortly before I made the map, I started studying his work for a month. For 1 week, when I drew, I only copied his work. The next week, I drew my characters but used his poses. The next week, I just drew off the top of my head, but I checked it with the sketches. The last week, I just drew whatever I wanted. This is what ended up happening. I totally aped his style, but that was the point. Over time, I weeded out anything I didn't need, which left a clear influence without an obvious copy. Hewlett's style is a perfect blend of pop art and comic art. It's also incredibly unique. You can spot it a mile away. For example, the way he uses his line weight is to add heavy lines on the bottom and dark sides and thin lines on the top or higher sides. There's very little line weight added to a curve. What this does is pop the image because your eye notices the slight contrast. It's so simple and subtle, but it's something you'd never think to do on your own. So let's scroll over here to Xenogears. This is my favorite video game. This influence isn't just the art, which is gorgeous. The character artist is Tanaka Kunihiko, and Tanaka's work just pops on the screen. His character designs were so interesting that I would pause the game just to stare at the avatars. I finally got my hands on a digital copy of Xenogears Perfect Works, and you can really see what Tanaka did. Just blows my mind. But beyond Tanaka's art, the music of Xenogears was a major influence. Mitsuda Yasunori blends rock, Celtic music, and classical music together, and it is unreal. You're listening to something that sounds like an Irish prayer, but it's composed by a Japanese dude. My absolute favorite song of his is Dajil, 5 different string instruments, violin, guitar, electric guitar, bass, and some Indian string instrument. It shouldn't work. It really shouldn't, but it does. This song will change your life, especially when each one comes in one after the other playing the same riff. Ugh. And then there's A Small of Two Pieces. It's the video game version of My Heart Will Go On. Perfect way to end a game. English version, Japanese version, both masterpieces. But what really got me was the story to Xenogears. I'd never played anything like this before. It blends sci-fi and fantasy, martial arts, well-known sci-fi films, and Christian mythology. It's a very religious game and takes some knocks on the Catholic and Protestant churches, as well as heaping in huge dollops of Gnostic Christianity into the mix. I'd never even heard of Gnostic Christianity before I started digging into the Christian themes in the game. The game not only broadened my knowledge of Christian lore, it also helped explain what I saw in Neon Genesis Evangelion and inspired a concept I'm working on called Savior. This influence of the game goes beyond even that. The music shaped an epic novel I've been working on for years. Key scenes are tied to songs from Xenogears and Xenosaga and another album Mitsuda did called Kirite. I wouldn't have created about a third of my concepts without this game. Let's keep going. How could I not be influenced by The Matrix? I was 16 when it came out, and it's the only film where I remembered entire scenes of dialogue from one viewing. This film proved that all the crazy ideas in my head didn't have to be animated. The film was my generation's Star Wars. It completely changed how people made movies, how people did special effects. Even the structure of sci-fi films changed to try to copy it. Now, this film came out about 9 months or so after Xenogears came out, so I immediately caught the Gnostic undertones of The Matrix. It's the philosophy, the questioning, the concepts introduced in the film that really worked for me. But it was The Matrix Reloaded that had the biggest influence. I know people don't like The Matrix sequels. I think Reloaded is actually a good film outside of the rave scenes and sex scenes and the crappy CGI. I mean, how do you not like the Merovingian? Leave out the Matrix orgasm, that scene is fucking brilliant. What really did it for me is that Reloaded takes everything that you thought you knew about the Matrix and flips it. It shows that the world's way more complicated than you think. The machines aren't all evil, the humans aren't all good. I love that kind of shades of gray. I also love that it introduced concepts of fate and choice and choicelessness. These are tricky issues, and the films, especially Revelations, don't always address them well, but at least they put the ideas out there. I think that's what pissed people off the most. These philosophical questions don't have easy answers, and relying on something like the Bible or one philosophy or how two directors try to boil them down won't help you. Okay, let's get to Naruto. Oh my god. This deserves its own video series, which it's gonna get. Where do I begin? Kishimoto Masashi is easily one of the best comic book storytellers ever. Ever. Anywhere. Ever. If you ever want to understand how to tell a cohesive, ongoing story with a mix of story arcs and lots of character building, read the first 26 volumes of Naruto. It's so well scripted and planned, you could break down what took this man almost a decade to draw in about 4 minutes. That's how well plotted it is. I actually wasn't interested in Naruto until one of my friends kept talking about it. I broke down and bought the first volume. Then I went back to Borders the next day and bought the next 3. The opening chapter alone is so good. And I think what made it better was that I was listening to the Kill Bill Volume 1 soundtrack while reading it. So when Iruka reveals that he hates the fox but has nothing but respect for Naruto, the last song from Kill Bill, The Lonely Shepherd, the one that was playing in the background at the end of the movie, exactly at the point where the credits roll, that's what was fucking playing. Perfect fucking timing. Kishimoto nails character development. When I say that damn near every character could hold their own book, I'm not lying. Perfect example, Choji. You didn't think shit about Choji. He was just the fat kid that was the comic relief. But then you get to the Sasuke retrieval arc and you're like, this motherfucker just became Boromir. And it's like, wait, did you just kill him? Oh my god. You can have a Hinata comic. You can have a Rock Lee comic. You can have a Gaara comic. Every character you meet has something to draw you in. This is a perfect example for SJW writers for how to write a diverse cast. Take Haku, admitted by Kishimoto himself to be one of the most powerful characters in the series. 14-year-old boy. Total badass, but he's basically a cross-dresser, if not transsexual or actually transgender. And I don't know anyone who doesn't like the character. Not a single person. It's unbelievable how well developed these characters are. And how Kishimoto just nails the emotion. I was practically in tears when I learned about Gaara's past. What happened with Rock Lee not being able to be a ninja? When's the last time you saw someone tell that kind of story to children? Rock Lee wants to win so bad he uses a forbidden technique and ironically takes away his chance to be the one thing he wants to be. And then we see him suffer for it. Ugh. And the art. Yeah, I know it dips later on, but in the beginning, it's like Otomo Katsuhiro's nephew decided to make comics. Kishimoto has been open about the Otomo influence, so you can see it. And those early Naruto volumes have incredible Akira-level detailing. Nothing else changed my approach to everything like Naruto, except for Dragon Ball. Oh yes, Toriyama Akira's magnum opus. Now, I'm not talking about the anime here, I'm talking about the manga. I watched the anime and loved it, but reading the manga gave me a whole new appreciation for Toriyama's talent and skill and creativity. From the potty humor to the awesome fights, Dragon Ball just gives you everything you could want in a page turner. Yeah, the hero always wins, but he earns his wins. Son Goku works for them, he trains, and sometimes he loses. The anime doesn't actually do the fights justice because the pacing in the comic is immaculate. Toriyama knows how to structure an action scene. They're so well paced. Dragon Ball was also the first time I saw anything remotely similar to the way that I like to structure stories. Each arc covers a period of time, and when it's over, there's a time jump. Maybe a couple of months, maybe a couple of years. The idea is that nothing major happens during that time. They just live normal lives. We only see when all hell breaks loose. The reason I like that so much is that I did the same thing with my comic stories. My heroes would fight their battles and then go about their lives. I was never interested in showing them fighting gangs or stopping carjackings. I wanted to show the big stuff. Dragon Ball showed me that this would work if it was well structured. I also added in some of the way that Dragon Ball characters use their powers into other stories, which really threw people off who weren't familiar with the concept of something like chi. I love this series so much that I read the entire thing once a year, every year, usually all in one day. Another manga that had a major influence on me is Hagane no Renkin Jutsushi, or Full Metal Alchemist. Oh my, this is the best brotherhood story I have ever seen. Written and drawn by Arakawa Hiromu. a woman. This woman, she knows her stuff. Go and read Stray Dog, her first published one-shot. So good. Then go and read Soten no Komori. You didn't even know one-shots could be this good. Arakawa is Toriyama level with her fight scenes. Just well-paced, well-framed, pure action, not a boring shot. So good, all the animators had to do for the anime was just do in-betweens. She basically storyboarded it for them. Like Kishimoto, Arakawa knows character building. There's not a dull character in FMA. There's someone for everyone. And just like Kishimoto, her cast is very diverse. There's every type of male and female character, including gay characters. I know about a dozen people who became anime or manga fans just from reading or watching FMA. It was the character interactions that did it for them. That and that scene with Nina. What I love about Arakawa's work is that she's got a very visually appealing style. She can draw muscles very well and sexy women. She plays with size and shape and expressions, and she knows how to frame a page, how to draw the eye to the right places, and how to keep things interesting. And the guts it takes to tell the story she's telling. She's basically making you root for Nazis. Ed Elric works for his world's equivalent of the Nazi party that won the war. He doesn't know what happened with the Ishbalans, and when he learns about it, he and his brother Al, and pretty much everyone else, are disgusted by it. But the folks he works with, all the characters we meet and grow to love, are murderers who slaughtered an entire race of people. Had Arakawa started the story with that, you would have never liked Mustang or Hughes. But showing you the aftermath and learning about them as people, and learning about the situation they were put in, you begin to understand why they did what they did, even though what they did is horrible. And I give Arakawa full credit, because she did her research for the volumes depicting the Ishvalan slaughter, including talking to Japanese war vets, to base the entire story around the idea of giving a literal arm and leg to bring back the one you love, and then building on this to show just how dark this can become. Absolutely incredible. But let's get to the big boy, the one sitting right there, Lord of the Rings. Eterello indureno tulien, sinome maruva ner hildinyar tinambar meta. I wasn't a Lord of the Rings fan until I saw the Fellowship film. Back in college, this guy told me that Lord of the Rings would change how I write. So I avoided the book because I had just started writing my own fantasy novel and I didn't want it creeping in. Before Fellowship came out, I decided to read the books. I read The Hobbit and I thought it was good, but it wasn't going to change anything about my work. Then I read the first 50 pages of Fellowship, especially the part where Gandalf explains the history of the ring, and I was like, yeah, that'll do it. Totally changed everything about what I did. Just like with The Matrix and Dragon Ball, Lord of the Rings showed me that the crazy ideas in my head could work, especially making up fake languages. I started creating this language for the novel. The language sounded like Japanese, which was on purpose, but I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just making up random words when I needed them. But when I watched the behind the scenes for Fellowship and learned about how Tolkien created these languages, I went and got this Tolkien dictionary and started tweaking my language. Here we are almost 15 years later, and I've got 3 functioning languages that I can write in and another 4 that I abandoned. I went hardcore into linguistics, picking up a lot of things intuitively because my mind just works this way, but just learning so much. I damn near learned Syriac after using it as a base for one of my languages. The mythology of Lord of the Rings was also an influence. As I was working on my novel, I kept creating these myths and folk tales within the story to explain what had happened in the past. I thought this was weird and obsessive, but I wrote them down anyway. Then I discovered the Silmarillion and went, oh, I'm not the only one. This bled to other concepts to the point that most of my recent work has extensive notes or fleshed out tales that are as deep as a primary story. More than that, the films also influenced my approach. I fell in love with Lord of the Rings because of the behind-the-scenes material on the DVDs. Hearing how much people loved the story was one thing. Seeing the amount of work they put into the films was another. The development of the cultures, the amount of artwork, and rethinking of each group is astonishing. You can literally tell each elvish group apart and tell who they are, what age they came from, and even how they're connected to the world around them. I was especially drawn to the Rohan designs. All these horse things were everywhere on the Rohan set, from the handles to the spoons, to things we never even see. That kind of detail is stunning, and it affected my approach to a story based on Mesoamericans. The village is based on birds, so I started designing all these bird motifs everywhere, just like with Rohan. Lord of the Rings also affected how I approached storytelling. It didn't make me want to write longer stories, but it did change which characters I might choose to focus on, and what themes would drive my narratives. I'm sure that would have happened as I got older, but the film and the book bumped it up. I'm tremendously grateful for the films and the book because it changed so much about my work and who I am as a person. So these are some of my influences, most of the big ones. I'd be interested in hearing about other creators' influences. If you've got a channel, it's a good video to make. Otherwise, thanks for listening.